Peace, brethren. Welcome to the Israelite Nation Friday Night Live. And today we have a very special topic. Tonight's topic is fear not. And basically, the meaning behind that topic is what fear is and what it is pertaining to the youth. So tonight we have a very special panel set up for you. It is a Rise Takeover Friday night. So we have Miriam from the Northeast New Jersey branch. We got Naomi from Missouri, and from ATL we got Rachel. So let's get a round of applause for our, well, I can't say a round of applause, but put some fires and thumbs up in the chat, put some likes and subscribe. Your like goal for tonight is 100 likes. I want to see 100 likes by the end of this video. So yeah, let's get started. Fear not. So we're just gonna go around the panel, and I want to get everyone's opinions on tonight's topic regarding fear. What do you guys think fear is to you? What is the definition of fear? In your own thoughts and opinions. Does anyone want to go first, or?
Sure, I can jump in. For me, when I think about fear, I don't necessarily about the definition, but I just think about the power that fear can hold over our lives and just the importance of understanding or taking the time to understand why we feel the way that we feel when we experience fear and what we can do to not be paralyzed from it, but move forward from it. So I'm super excited to get into the next topic. I think it's much needed. We're a growing nation, we're a progressive nation, and so fear is something that is inevitable. We're all going to encounter it. It's just all about how we deal with it.
That's so true, so true.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I feel fear all the time as a young person, all the time. It's like hand shaking, your thoughts are everywhere, your heart is just stammering and your words can't come out properly. I mean, it's very well connected to anxiety and nervousness and all of that, but I think fear is we see it everywhere, and it's when we encounter new experiences or public speaking or just doing anything as a young person. I think everything in the world is kind of new to us. We're experiencing everything through a lot of the times fearful eyes. And I mean, that's just what it is. And so it's about being comfortable with fear and trying to do it and have your toolbox that you have, especially in Israel and in Rise, constantly growing up and learning about how to combat fear. And I guess it's kind of why we're here today, but I think it's certainly a feeling, and sometimes it's overwhelming as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with what everyone has said so far. I think fear is a serious thing that sometimes we don't talk about a lot because, we talk a lot about our ancestors in the Bible and how they were so fearless, how David went up to Goliath and slung him down with this slingshot. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. I don't know if I have that sort of courage. So I think fear is, of course, an amazing and such an important topic for especially us as a youth to talk about. And I think it stems a lot from uncertainty and not really, knowing where you're going or knowing what you're doing, which is why it's so important for us to have this conversation so that we can talk to our fellow youth and let them know, hey guys, it is okay to be fearful. It is okay to be uncertain, not know where you're going. That's why we lean on each other, the God of Israel, our brethren. So yeah, I'm really, really excited to get into this topic tonight.
So true. Thank you guys so much. So true. Wisdom already, and we're only 4 minutes into this. So for me, fear, I think well, I think you guys just said so much already about fear, but I just also think that it's not a completely negative thing. I do feel like there are some positive sides to fear, but I feel like when you let fear kind of take over in an irrational way to the point where you're not even willing to overcome it, that's when I feel like that's when it becomes negative. So I think the youth have a lot of fear in their life. I know I've experienced fear. It's just the uncertainty of the unknown. You have so many questions about whether or not you can complete the task to become the human being that you want to be in your future, Um, tons of stuff that we'll get into tonight. So once again, I'm just really glad to have all you guys here, and everyone in the audience. Remember, thumbs up, hit the like button, and let's get into this. So if our moderator could start with the first slide, please. Fear not, that's our title. right. So, according to the University of West Alabama Studies, and I'm not going to read all of it. If you want to read it, it's right on screen for our viewers. But according to the University of West Alabama Studies, fear is an emotion that has played a significant role in our evolution and survival. It can be crushingly strong and paralyzing, but is also necessary for our safety. So, one of the ways that stuck out to me in this, and just in more of a spiritual sense, is that um, fear doesn't always have a complete negative connotation that some people would think it has at first. Fear, it's needed in our lives. You need fear to survive, to keep you safe. And when I think about that, I think about my fear for the God of Israel. You fear because you fear of his power, his wrath. You fear of making him upset. And I feel like that's not necessarily a negative, it's a positive because you're humbling yourself. So many people in this world don't have that same kind of fear. They are fearless in a way that is sort of negative, I guess I'd want to say, because they don't believe in God. So they just think themselves to be higher than God. At least that's how I saw it. And then pertaining to the youth, I think sometimes it's okay to have fear. You know how you guys were saying earlier, it's just something that's going to naturally happen, but that's where we have each other to lean off of. So I want to hear some of y'all thoughts on this.
I think that's really the part about the God of Israel, Levi, that you said, especially because we see the God of Israel as our heavenly Father, right? And we have that fear for him, the same fear that we have for our parents, the same fear where we're like, oh my God, I don't want to disappoint them. Let me make sure I do well in school. Let me make sure I do all my chores, make sure I take care of the house in whatever way I can. Like that fear kind of gives us that drive and that motivation to want to do well, not only for ourselves, but for our family, this nation, and ultimately for the God of Israel. So I think, like you said, fear can be something that's very positive for us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even talking about fear of the God of Israel, we see a lot in the Bible where there's a generation that forgot God, and they forgot what the God of Israel done for us, but they also forgot to fear him and to fear what happens when we're disobedient. And that same is reflected with our parents. I mean, I feared my parents a lot when I was younger, and if I wasn't able to motivate myself, fear definitely was able to motivate me to do well in school or to just get things done and be a part of the nation and stuff like that. So it's a factor that is very natural and it moves you in life. A lot of fear does happen, and until you understand why things are done the way they are. But I definitely agree. The fear is definitely a factor in a lot of relationships with the God of Israel. And I think our parent is a big one as well.
Yeah, I want to just say ditto to what everyone said, and to even hop off of what have you said, Levi. Just from that definition, the thing that stands out to me, like you were saying, is the word necessary. And it just makes me consider the fact that you cannot have courage. Courage is not possible without fear, right? You have to learn to overcome your fears in order to be brave and to be courageous. And so when we talk about leaders, or I think we had a comment from Elder Jeffrey, who mentioned some of the greatest success stories start from fear. Our greatest leaders weren't necessarily like fearless. It's that they had fear and were able to overcome it, right? And move forward. And I just think as a progressive nation, it's so important for us to look at fear as an opportunity to expand ourselves, as an opportunity to grow and reflect. And I think, again, fear is very powerful. It has the power to distort your reality, to paralyze you, but it can also be used as a fuel to allow you to reach greater heights. And so I think considering those options that you have with fear, again, it's just so important to look at what you do with fear and not necessarily what that fear is or what it's holding you back. It's all about how you go about it.
I definitely agree. I mean, I remember hearing this one thing. I don't remember who. It's probably a common saying, but it was new to me at the time where it says, if you're scared, do it scared. I mean, fear isn't just automatically going to go away in a lot of situations, but you have to do it anyway. I think a part of that is being extremely comfortable. There's this like psychological thing or like some sort of therapy thing where you put yourself in awkward situations to get yourself accustomed to being awkward and fearful of judgment and all of that. I mean, I think that's something real that we have to take into consideration is not just fear and knowing what fear is and feeling that, but being comfortable with that and being able to still move on and not be stuck.
That's truly a great example. You guys are all just speaking facts. So much wisdom among our youth today. And I do also want to get to some of these comments here because our audience is on fire with it. Lakeisha, you said fear can be a great motivator. That's so true. Just speaking what's being said, fear can be a great motivator. It's what can move you and drive you to accomplish a goal. And in many ways, I kind of like how Rachel was speaking of how some of the greatest leaders you've seen are motivated by fear. And I kind of tie that today, how we as Israelites, our duty, even as here as youth, is we have to go against the grain. Um, I'm trying to think, like you have examples like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. And these are obviously just big names off the top of my head, but when you look at them, what they're doing, their lives and their families, their lives, those lives were at stake because of they were speaking out and going against the status quo. We today, we may not realize it yet, but the youth have that role today as well. One way or another, you may not think that, oh, it's a different time, but you have to go against the grain. We're in the world, but we're not of it. And I just think that this lesson and this message will hopefully allow you to understand that you're going to face fear, but how to mainly overcome that fear and how to truly obtain what is courage. So just great points. We have another message, I think. Felicia Singleton said, afraid to fail, so you rise to the occasion. See, that's facts. Thank you. That's facts. Let's put some fires in the chat. That's facts. Just so much great wisdom going on here. So remember, hit the like button. So let's head on to the next slide. And I think this should be a Bible verse, if I'm correct. Oh, okay. So this one should be a bit more relatable to us teens, anxiety in teens. So I'm just going to skim to it. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and read the entire paragraph, but I'm starting off. According to the Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital, teenagers are ripe with new experiences, opportunities, and challenges. Also, during this time, teenagers' brains are changing and they want more independence and autonomy. During this time, there are many stressors. For example, teenagers might worry about starting secondary school, fitting in with friends, final examinations, schoolwork. And I think that all those fears, as it's saying, is those are kind of elevated within the pandemic and social distancing, and just social media even takes that to a new height. And these were just kind of some of the more social fears that you see in teenagers, and that I can even relate to myself with just how uh, stressing and how stressing in high school when I was back in high school. There's a lot of like anxiety and wanting to do your best to make not only your parents proud, but to make sure that you have a future once you get out of high school. Um, just from personal experience, and this is just a personal life. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but when I got out of high school, I wasn't really in a place where I wanted to be because of how badly COVID had thrown me off in my junior year. So like my grades weren't where I needed them to be, and I was worried. I prayed to my God. I wanted to go to college, but I didn't have my GPA was just like right there. It was a 2.9. It was bad. It was really bad. I was in a very desperate position. I was scared. I was worried. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was worried. I prayed. I asked for my God, and eventually I started to see those miracles, and things change. Let me get my thoughts focused so I can tell the story a little bit better. But what happened was once I prayed to my God and kind of started to organize my life and lay out a plan for what I was going to do, that's when I started to see things change. And lo and behold, first I got a rejection letter from the school I wanted to enter, but lo and behold, it was like a month or so later, and I got an acceptance letter because they had gotten like all my grades and stuff, and I got an acceptance letter to the school I wanted to. So that was just a positive and showing you how you guys were talking about earlier, is that we are going to experience fear, but what's important is how you react to the anxiety, to the stress, and to the fear. If I would have just sat there and not done anything and not reached out to my school and to the school I wanted to go to, or tried to lay out a plan and try to do all those things, if I didn't try anything and just sat in that stagnant place, that fear would have overcame me and it would have won. But because I prayed to my God and I did the work, I was able to see the miracles and reap those benefits. And just like what you guys were saying earlier, how relying on your family and your God, that's what's going to get us through those tough times. So that's just my take on it. I want you guys to speak. It's not my lesson. So
No, I'll jump in there, Levi. I think this was really good. And I see a lot of comparisons to just fear that you experience as a young adult in general. I want to say Nay mentioned this earlier, but it was like saying, like, you just have so many opportunities at this age. It feels like you can literally make so big life altering decisions right now that will like impact you for a long time. And so it makes you fearful, it makes you anxious. And I kind of parallel it to the nation as well. Like, I think we're in our young adult years as being a nation and being established. And so you have this foundation, right, of values and skills that your parents have given you or that you got through your upbringing. And so our nation has a foundation built from Elder Shadrach, right, and the leadership that's been there. And so now, as this upcoming generation, we have the opportunity to build upon that, right? And to go in whatever direction we want to go to glorify our God. And that's intimidating. I think the word mentioned earlier was overwhelming. And so, again, I think it really comes, it's easier said than done, I'll say. It's way easier said than done, but thinking of fear as an opportunity and getting excited about it is kind of what we have to look at in order to progress. Looking at fear as an opportunity to empower yourself, right? Like someone mentioned how the Bible will say like they were an evil and adulterous generation. But as like this upcoming generation of youth, we have the opportunity to be a righteous generation, an obedient generation, maybe even God of Israel's most loved generation. I don't know if I'm like overstepping there, but like there's so much opportunity. And so it's about like getting excited about that, which again is easier said than done. Because I remember being there senior year of college, high school, you're like, Lord, there's so much to do, there's so much I can do. What do I do? And I think in those moments, self-reflection is so powerful.
I definitely agree. Just overall blanket statement. And I also think, fear can, I lost my train of thought. I was thinking about in high school and all of that fear. No, it's gone. I'll intercept again.
Well, if I could just
Yeah.
jump in. I think recently I've learned that if you you're not supposed to stay in certain emotions for too long. Like you can't be happy all the time. You shouldn't be sad all the time. You shouldn't be angry all the time. You shouldn't be fearful all the time, right? So you feel that emotion, but what you do is you don't really let it control you, at least in a negative way. So let's say you're angry. The more that you think about how angry you are, the more angry you get, right? You're afraid. The more you think about, oh my God, this could go wrong, that could go wrong, I can't do anything, the more fearful you get. So if you do the opposite and you say, okay, I know I'm afraid, but let me use this emotion to do something positive and meaningful with the emotion instead of just letting it fester. I think, like Rachel said, it's definitely easier said than done, and it's going to take a lot of work to do something like that. But making sure that you keep that in mind as you feel that fear, as you feel that sense of being overwhelmed, would be an amazing way for you to take those emotions and use it for some sort of positive thing in your life, whether that's in school, whether that's in Israel, whether that's through your career. Like, use that fear, acknowledge that fear, and put it to something positive.
I definitely agree. And that's something you even learn, the physicalities of fear. That's something you learn in like therapy when dealing with like anxiety, is because fear is it's a mental response, but such a physical response that can also make your mental even worse. The shaking and everything like that. And sometimes your words don't come out right and all of that. You can use physical responses to combat it. So if you can't feel like you can't breathe, you take a deep breath and you breathe out. If you feel like you're shaking, try to move with yourself, maybe dance a little, like shake it all out, stuff like that. And I will say, when you say use your fear, that really resonates with me because I chose a very fearful career, which is acting. Like I'm in fear all the time in front of people, and people ask if I have stage fright, and I really, really do. But I use fear because if I'm coming on stage and I'm fearful of, oh, I don't know my next line, or all of a sudden I don't want to be here, like I'm just filled with fear, I would use that to give my character energy or to give my character some motivation or some movement within that scene or that play, so that my fear becomes different emotions. I take the physicalities and even sometimes the mental and I make it my character. So that's a very specific example, but I think it's something to learn from in terms of making fear something else, making fear your own, and trying to combat that in a different sense.
Yeah, I'm like so resonating what everyone is saying. I think someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Sarah, she was saying that like don't let your thoughts control you. And so again, with Israel, just being under the idea or framing our way of thinking of not letting things hold our power, right? Like taking the power back. And so I think really looking at things like, is it going to paralyze you or propel you, really puts it into perspective. And Renee, what you were saying about acting resonates with me because when I was in middle school, very, very anxious person. Okay, very quiet. I used to like escape through books. It was just, I hated middle school. I hated it. It was the worst part of puberty. And I was also very shy. I didn't talk to a lot of people. And it wasn't until I did like a summer program with acting that I came back after that summer and I felt really like I started to come into myself more. And I think it's because, as you were saying, Nay, like in that career, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're often putting yourself in situations that you would never otherwise be in, doing things you never would. I remember like the little like things that you do pre-show, just like completely out there for someone that was introverted. But from that experience, I was able to become more comfortable with myself. And so I just really resonate, like take those life experiences, like you said, tap into like the physicality so that mentally you can be stronger, so that spiritually you can be more stronger. So resonate with that.
So true, Rachel. Thank you guys, all of you. That was just truly beautiful, beautiful. And we have a question here from Rise. Rise up, rise up, rise up. Oh,
Ooh,
rise up.
yeah,
So we
let's
got a
flag.
we got a question from Rise. How can we as young people learn from the fear of our past failures and mistakes? I can speak to that. I can speak to that a little. So I think that when it's just kind of like, I guess I'd say, adjusting to your past years and mistakes. I do that a lot. How Rachel was speaking, middle school, it was a rough time for me, especially. I just all sometimes I still think about how I made mistakes in middle school, have said things I shouldn't have. But I think kind of just as you grow and as you learn, as you try to stay on that straight and narrow path, it almost to me it will kind of come naturally. I feel like if you have kind of a positive outlook and positive growth on things, because it's almost like you look at that experience that you went through, that negative experience, and you're determined to not be in that same situation or do that same stupid action again that would put you in that situation. Um, and I guess what it's with I need to see the question one more time, but I think when it's like regarding experiencing the same similar fears over and over again is you kind of get used to those fears or fears or facing that same trial that you faced before, like how Naomi was talking about being in plays. The first time you may do it, it may be terrifying, but once you've gotten used to it and you pushed yourself out there, fail or whether you fail or don't, if you push yourself out there and you get back up and you try again, you may do better. It's only going to get better, but it's kind of has to stay with your mentality, I guess. You can't let that failure or mistake bog you down. Miriam was speaking about earlier, emotion cannot stay the same. An emotion has to change. Your actions have to change. And what you do and respond to different situations, that has to change. Or else you can't grow and you can't succeed. That's my take on it. Anyone else?
I think also when we talk about the past failures and mistakes, it's not just, learning from our past failures and mistakes. My mother always reminds me that she has made mistakes so I can keep myself from doing the same. So we can learn from our elders and people that are telling us kind of how to live life. And it's not like, of course, your peers are very like beneficial to you as a young person, but I think also listening to our elders and priests and people who are older than us and have experienced that. And also, that being said, I think when we read the Bible, I mean, that's not our personal past and our personal mistakes, but it's us as a people that's our past and our mistakes. We can definitely learn from the people that we read about and to hopefully keep ourselves from making those same mistakes as well.
Snap.
So true, so true. We're gonna start getting into some more scripture. So, the next panel, please. Next slide, please. Mm,
It's the slide after this if we
yeah,
want.
slide after this. You can skip this one too. Yeah, we're gonna start with Deuteronomy 31, verse 7. If you have your Bibles with you, feel free to read along. Does anyone here on our panel wish to read?
Yeah, I can. Oh, Rachel, were you gonna?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, so Deuteronomy 31, verse 7. And Moses called unto Joshua and said unto him in the sight of all Israel, Be strong and of good courage, for thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it.
So this verse specifically, it's a short verse, but I kind of felt like it kind of speaks a lot to what we're talking about here. How I think Rachel and Miriam were speaking on it earlier. How as the youth we are kind of open up to almost like these infinite possibilities, so many different ways that we can advance the nation, and it's intimidating. It's a very daunting task. And I think what Moses is saying here, first you gotta kind of gotta understand Moses and Joshua's relationship. Moses is almost like another father figure or a family figure. He's a mentor to Joshua. Joshua is being taught by Moses to eventually take the reins and lead the people when the time comes. So I feel like in this scene, Moses can see that Joshua himself is uneasy about this. And I kind of think that it's kind of funny because it's almost like Moses is, in a way, even talking to himself, how he was first uneasy when he talked to the God of Israel, unsure if he could take on this task. And but I feel like Joshua just relates a little bit more since he was younger at the time. But saying be strong and of good courage, that's really powerful to me. It's a very simple, short few words, but it means a lot, especially when you put it in terms of what Joshua has to do and the task that is at hand. Any other comments?
Yeah, and I think it's also reminding him, you're not in this alone. The God of Israel is literally, this is your land. This is your people. We just literally encountered, well, not just now, but closer to it than us, Egypt. And going through all of that. And I'm sure it's being told all around. And well, hopefully, and people are remembering that. And so he's like, this is your land. You have the God of Israel behind you. Your people are here. And that's also something to learn from in modern times. I mean, us as young people, the world itself can be daunting. And you said, of the world, we're not in it. In the world, we're not of it. We're in this and we see all around us, and things can be daunting. And it's like going into that new land, that land with people in it that we don't know, with fears and stuff that we have. But, you got to have the God of Israel behind you. I think that's what he's telling him as well.
That's so true. That's so true. And I also liked how you're speaking on like just having that support system behind you. It's really important, that family, to keep you stable. And it's also, I love how the God of Israel is always reminding his leaders that I'm always going to be here with you. It's very kind of heartwarming as a father son or father daughter conversation to know that he's always there watching over you to help you get through it. He's already saying the land's already yours. I'm here with you. Did anyone else have any topics? Anyone? Or if I do want to read off some of these amazing comments we have. Herbert Rainey, such a complex subject matter. I have great admiration for our youth panels, courage in tackling an issue that most people, myself included, tend to hold at arm's length. Thank you so much, Herbert. Thanks for tuning in. Put some fires in the chat, everyone. Shelby Brown said, Rise panel, do you think a way to conquer fear is to put trust in the God of Israel? Yes, I very much do believe that a lot.
Yeah, I want to jump in here because, sorry, I was just reading the scripture in totality. Um, I just think it's very profound because here, like we said earlier, you're seeing like a transition in leadership. And as we know, our people of Israel are not easy to deal with. I even think about, before Moses had to tell the children of Israel that it was time to be free, that God of Israel was coming down, even he was like worried and almost had some self-doubt as well. And so I think a question earlier that was just posed is, do you think having trust in the God of Israel is important? I think it's so important, but the question is, how? Like, how can we apply what we're seeing happening with Moses and Joshua to our own lives? And I think with trust comes reflection, right? You have to go through, as like, if you read the beginning part of this chapter, it sort of talks about, they have to go in to take the land, but be not afraid. It says in verse 4, it says, the Lord shall do unto them as he did to Zion and to Og, king of the Amorites, which we sing in like song 136, which is my jam, right? Like, think about all those times the God of Israel has come through for you, and use that to take away that fear. Realize the only person you should fear is the God of Israel. You see it in the Bible, fear not in princes, no man, like that's insulting. Like, worry about the God of Israel, and that's where that trust will come to help subside that fear, to help you propel and do the amazing things that we can do and that we're destined to do. So I think this is such a great scripture. Anytime there's a transition in leadership, it's huge. Even thinking as like a youth to now be responsible. I think one of the early slides talks about like fear of growing up and how a lot of that is dealt with, like when you get older and you become an adult, you have more responsibilities. And so being responsible for a whole nation, whew, that is a lot. It's a huge undertaking, but we have to turn to our God. We have to reflect on our past, and we have to pray. We have to be tapped into that spirituality because our spirituality is our strength. And thank you for the donations. I see a donation. Ooh, let's get some more fires in the chat. Love to see it. Love to see it.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You really went off there. That was amazing. And also what you were saying about the responsibility that we have. It also kind of makes me think, and why I really like this verse in this chapter specifically is the parallels and the almost like direct cycle or relationship it has to now. Just how we're in the stage where we're coming out of this new Egypt. And now it's time for the youth. That torch is going to be passed over to us sooner or later. I'm not a little 10 or 7-year-old boy no more. I'm 18. I'm a man. I got to start taking on that role. We all have to start taking on that role as RISE members and RISE representatives. So it's just truly a beautiful thing that I like to see, especially within the Bible, how you see the parallels and just seeing the Bible come to life. I love saying that because it's truly beautiful. Does anyone else have any more comments before we move on?
I just think something that I've pondered as well is I think sometimes just reading the Bible, a lot of times we feel like taking on leadership or being a leader is something that has to be appointed, or someone has to like tell you, okay, this is what you need to do. And it wasn't until like recently, or even just going through college and seeing leadership happen within different organizations, I think it's also just important to remember that you can take the initiative, right? I'm not saying that you all of a sudden I'm an elder, right? Or like I'm a priest. Like, don't do that. Please don't quote me on that. But what I'm saying is see a need, fill a need, right? You can take the initiative to start a project, to contribute to Israel in some way and be a leader in that way. And I know that's something I had a learning curve just as a youth, being in leadership and like maybe organizations at school, etc. I was like, oh, like we would come to the end of the year and not a lot would be achieved, and people would be like, well, no one was doing their role, and I was like, oh, like it was like, oh, you didn't tell me what I was supposed to do, so I didn't do anything. And so I think a part of growing up is realizing you don't always have to be told what to do. It's just taking the initiative to do it, pushing past your fear, and doing what needs to be done.
So true. Take an initiative. That's a great talking point. Love that. So, oh, we got another $20 donation.
Thank you.
I want to see another 20 likes with it too. So
yes. Match the donations with likes.
Let's go. So moving on to our next slide. Yeah, let's move on to our next slide. Yeah. So this is also going deeper into Joshua. Do we have anyone else to read? I think Miriam already read. So who wants to go next?
Okay, I will try because the text is small on my screen. Okay. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them.
So that once again kind of ties into the chapter before in Deuteronomy. And I do have to say, when I was setting up the lesson and getting all the scriptures together, my mom, the first thing she came to me, she was like, you got to do Joshua. You got to do Joshua. It has to be Joshua. She was really adamant about Joshua. So I picked up Joshua and I looked at it, and I got to agree. She was right. It's all here, plain as day, plain in text. And it was just going back to what you're saying, is how the God of Israel has our back, and we have to call on him. Even when you look at what Joshua goes on to do in the Battle of Jericho, they listen to what the God of Israel tells them, and at the end they cry out to the heavens, they cry his name, and the walls fall. You got to call for help when you're in those times of distress, or when you're in those times of fear. There's no way you can always take on every challenge by yourself. And I just think Joshua was a great example of that, and also reminding him how the same I did for Moses, I'm going to do for you. I'm going to be there for you. My spirit is with you. And I think today and in this time as Israelites, we have to remember that the spirit of God is with us. We're the ones who are tied to Joshua, Moses, all of those greats. Those are in our bloodline. That's a part of our spirit. So I think one thing that helps me in those times of fear is knowing who you are. Obviously, you don't get prideful or boastful in that. You don't walk around saying I'm as good as Jesus. That's wild. But you understand that if my forefathers are able to overcome all of these insane challenges, they take down the greatest nations ever seen. They're able to take these nations down. Then why can't I overcome my small and earthly task? Think of it from that point of view. Tie the Bible into your life. That's what you have to do. You got to live by it. You can't be an Israelite and not live by it. And I just want to address some of these donations. Let's go. We got $20 from Felicia. Israel's future is boundless. Thank you.
Yes, that part.
Walter Hunter, another $10. Hello to you all from Dallas, Texas. Hello, Walter. Thank you for tuning in. Then we have James Gibbs with another $20. Let's go. I like that. Like, subscribe, donate, do it all. Let's blow this channel up so that everyone can hear this truth. So that was just my take on it. I want to get some other points in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But even verse 3, every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you. I mean, what a pep talk. Mm-hmm. This is the type of thing you're reading when you're wanting to get through something, or you're like trying
Yeah.
to reach that next point in your life, like you don't know what to do. I mean, of course, we go to the Bible, but this is something that should motivate you, that should put wings beneath your feet. I mean, this is like strength right here. I mean, in hearing it like straight from the God of Israel, I mean, what can't you do?
Amen.
And I think something really important to highlight is the relationship that the God of Israel had with Joshua. He had that same relationship with Moses, right? And it went down to Joshua. Just as the leadership changed, he had the relationship with Moses, and he transfer that relationship to Joshua. And I think it's so important to highlight that the importance of us creating our own relationships with the God of Israel. Like, yeah, we were born in this nation, offered up, named, we grew up in this nation, but that was basically from our parents' teaching, right? And the teaching of our aunts, our priesthood, our uncles, everyone, right? But then there comes a time in our lives where we have to decide that we want this for ourselves, right? And we have to create this relationship with the God of Israel for ourselves. And you may see it come at a time where you're kind of at your lowest and you're like, dang, like I need something. I can't call mom to do this for me. I can't call dad. I can't call auntie. I can't call uncle to do it for me. Of course, you can call for support, but you're the one that has to do it, right? So you pray to the God of Israel for that strength. You pray for that courage. You pray for the ability to even do whatever task you want to do, you need to do. You have, as the youth, we have to start creating and forming our own relationships with the God of Israel, just like Joshua did, just like Moses did, just like Abraham did, just like all of our forefathers did, because at the end of the day, it's going to be us and him. It's not going to be, like you live and unfortunately you pass, but um you have to create that relationship with the God of Israel, and you have to make sure at the end of the day you did everything you could, whether that's for the nation, for yourself, for your family, and you went to the God of Israel and you learned about him, and you taught about him, and you passed that on for generations to come, and you create that relationship with him. So like, I have the God of Israel on my side, not because of my parents, not because of the elders, because I have created that relationship with my God.
Amen. So true. Just comes what you were saying, or just talking about how you got to take responsibility for it, especially kind of tying into baptism. Once you're baptized, you're in charge of your own spirituality and soul. But even before that, I think it's just important to practice that, to have a strong spirituality. You can't always expect your parents to always be praying on your behalf. And in fact, in some ways, when you look at the Bible, it's that kind of mentality where the adult may be doing what's right, but the children isn't, and that leads on to affect the next generation. Like, we've been at times where Israel has forgotten the entire word of law. They didn't even know nothing about this. And I just think that to me, for me partially, it's like the fear of knowing that, if almost like the fear of not wanting to be in that situation, to lose that connection to my God. I don't want to be in a position where I'm not able to properly teach my children my culture and to spread this legacy on, because it's truly a beautiful thing what our elder has given us. He's given us a second chance to reignite what was once lost. And I feel like to lose that would just be a terrible offense to him. So, although I do see as rebuilding the nation a daunting task, and one that's definitely not going to be easy, I think one, how you were saying, it's you're not in it alone. You're definitely not in it alone. You have to remember, one, you have that connection to your God of Israel, which you got to be responsible for. You got to pray. You have to ask, and you even have to be responsible for just asking for help from your family, to lean and support on them. Rise is not a person. Rise is a group. We're all Rise. We all form Rise. So we all have to come together for that. So just thank you so much, Mary. You're speaking facts. So we're going to move on to our next panel for the night. Fears of growing up 3. Do you have any? Well, I'll just skim through this. Death anxiety, death fears are triggered both by negative and positive events. As people sense time passing and confronted with sickness, frustrations in life, and reminders of death, they fear morality. Paradox. Well, basically, what I wanted to get out of this is there can be fears of your own life at stake. And I kind of want to tie this to how we were talking about earlier, how we're going against the grain. Um, you had some of the greatest leaders like I was saying, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, they had to do things in which their own life was at stake. And although I'm not saying you're going to specifically be in that situation, I think as an Israelite, we got to kind of understand that um, this is our life. You know what I mean? Losing that connection, it is akin to death. When you lose that connection to your God, when you when you lose who you are, you might as well be just like the dead walking who are getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas. So that's what I kind of related this to when it's talking about death, not just a general fear of death that's going to be natural, but I think more of just a far deeper fear or a more spiritual death. I think of the fear of, like I said, not wanting to end up in that situation where spiritually I am dead. And I feel like that's what motivates me to do better. Or you can even kind of tie it to just being in a negative, very negative spot where, like I was saying, you fear spiritually dead. I feel like a lot of youth feel like their lives are headed to a terrible, terrible place that they don't want to be, where they're just not successful at all. And I feel like those are just some of the challenges and anxiety you face when you see these daunting tasks in the world.
I think Levi, even when you mentioned going against the grain and you mentioned like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, you could even look at the examples that we have in the Bible. You can look at Queen Esther, who was going to be killed by Haman if because she was Israel. You can look at Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. How you can literally be killed for praying and worshiping the God of Israel, but they still did that. They did that. Like at least today, we don't have to be afraid of worshiping our God. We're on a YouTube live right now doing a Bible study, yelling
Mm-hmm.
out the God of Israel's name for the world to hear. Back then, with our forefathers, they couldn't do things like that because they would be persecuted, they would be killed because they were different. So going against the grain, like what we're doing right now, is easier than it was back then, but we can look at our ancestors, we can look at the Esthers, the Daniels, the Shadrachs, and even our elder Shadrach Porter. He went against the grain as well, and he brought Israel back. So it's just, you can look at our ancestors in the Bible. You can even look at our leaders now and see and get that motivation and get that courage from them, and see that not only is it possible, but they did it, and they did it amazingly. So you take that and be like, okay, since they can do it, I can do it too. Okay.
Facts. It was a beautiful way you related it to the Bible. That was facts. Anyone else want to speak on it?
I just wanted to reiterate something that Sarah said in the group chat, which was, what was it? Plan for the best, prepare for the worst, and let the God of Israel do the rest. Which I think is encompassing a lot of what we're talking about with fear and with going against the grain, because you do have to have a lot of faith and preparation and knowing that you're not alone. And so I think, just as is the all-encompassing saying to what complements kind of what we're saying today.
Mm, that's true. Thank you. Thank you. Rachel, I'm looking at you now.
No, I just agree with what everyone was saying. And I think it just ties back to what we said earlier, is just being strong in your why, right? Some of the leaders you brought up, Levi, like MLK, they did lose their life, but for them, what they were fighting for was worth it, right? A lot of times, change, a new era, I hope I said the era, involves like risking your life. And so I think, it really encapsulates like how debilitating fear can be, because fear can be there, again, it's there to protect us. So there are life threatening situations that you can encounter. And so just being strong in your why am I doing this? Why is it important? Why is it, someone said, our future is boundless, right? Why is it so important that we work towards this boundless future and work to uplift our gods? When you can answer that, that's so empowering, especially because, guys, we're in our time of freedom. Like, I'm so empowered by that. I'm like, whatever I want to be, whatever I want to do, I can really do it because we have the greatest God. And so just going in with that mentality helps so much when you're encountering these moments of fears, knowing that why am I fearful? Why shouldn't I be? Why is this worth it? Are the questions you have to ask.
So true. And then I kind of also think about what we see going on today in the news with Kyrie. I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of it. If you haven't, probably have Facebook or internet. So I suggest you Google it because I'm not going to get into all of it tonight. That's an entire lesson on its own. But you just see how the idea of when someone, even today, you go against the mindset or the social mindset or thought of the world, even just a little bit, and you can see how they'll threaten your entire livelihood, the way you live, everything. They trying to take everything from that man for just thinking differently. And that's, to me, is just a taste of what we have to do as the job as Israelites. We have to spread the truth. That's that's your job, that's your mission, and that's your goal. And just once again, how you're looking in the Bible, the apostles, the apostles and the prophets, they all put their lives on the line to speak this truth. And I think at the end of the day, as Israelites, especially as the youth, we have to be willing to put our lives on the line for this if we have to. Uh, Obviously, you pray. That's why you pray to the God of Israel, though. Obviously, I don't want to end off on a negative note. I'm not okay. I'm not trying to discourage you. That's why you pray to the God of Israel for your protection. He's always there. He said it to Joshua. He's there for every land you tread on. I'm there for you. It's gonna be yours. So, like I said, you're gonna be facing those dangers. That fear is going to overcome to you, but you have to remember who you are, where you come from. My dad said this to me on my 14th birthday. I always like to say it: remember to never forget. That's powerful to me. So, next slide.
Oh, I think we have a
Oh,
question in the chat, Lee.
this Sophia put: do you guys fear being an Israelite with what's going on in the world? It's a good question. Anyone want to take that? Anyone want to take that question?
I will. No, I think I can positively say that. I mean, there are like fearful like moments, like of course, because sometimes just just being different and against the grain in the world and of it, it comes with that. But I think it matters also that I've been an Israelite my entire life, and I was in public school since middle school. And so dealing with the world and people with different opinions, sometimes hurtful opinions, like you kind of strengthen your skin in that way, and you garner more tools in your Israelite toolkit to battle the world and to defend yourself against what the world might say or do. And a lot of the times when it doesn't kill you, it does make you stronger. So you kind of strengthen yourself each battle and each tribulation and each prayer that you have answered, each connection you feel to the God of Israel, each of those iterations, or at least I feel stronger. And so I can confidently say I don't fear being an Israelite in this world for sure.
So I think I relate to that a lot. And especially thinking about it in more of a, I guess, just not in such a drastic sense as talking about, but kind of just that fear of feeling alone, or just standing out, being different, because you have to stand different. It's gonna be noticeable. I remember just being in ASP. They were having a huge Christmas party in the back of the lunchroom, and I had to sit there with my little sister up in the front. I told my sister, look forward, do not look back. I was thinking like, I don't want to turn around and turn assault or something. To look forward. So this kind of like that same scenario is that fears kind of creeps in because you're almost tempted. You kind of There's that almost like temptation that kind of is all around you, trying to get you to turn back, to want to be a part of that. But I think that what really helped with me is how you were saying is you were doing this since you were in pre-K. You were raised to do this. But I think speaking on some of our more newcomers, our young newcomers, does anyone have any tips or guides for them when it comes to these kind of fears about standing out and being different? Because for some of them, it may be like, they used to do Christmas, they used to be able to go to those parties, but now they can't because they're in Israel. So I kind of want to hear, Miriam, Naomi, what do you guys have to say on that?
I think definitely talking about it and leaning on your Israelite peers, so that even though we may not completely understand, we still do understand being different and feeling kind of outcasted. Because, like was mentioned, the Christmas parties, the Halloween parties, the decorating, the snowman, the writing the Valentine's Day cards to your parents, and your things like that. It's like we weren't able to do those things. And even now, like as we're older, not going to certain parties because it's Halloween weekend, or not being a part of certain office activities because it's Secret Santa, doing things like that, like having those experiences and being able to share them with each other, and making sure they know that they're not alone in it, and that there are people that, even though we haven't gone through the same exact experiences, we can still relate to you in a certain way. So just leaving the table open for those conversations and being able to relate to each other, I think, is something that could really, really help new young people.
It's
I
true.
mean, that's why Rise is so important. I mean, I can see all these things that are coming to fruition that we're planning and doing. I mean, this is all garnered towards to Israel and young people, and being in this world and getting all those tools to do that, or strengthen your spirituality, your mental, your physical, in some ways, and in doing that. And that's why that is so important, to go to your peers and people that you have. Um, and also, I think we say you have to be uncomfortable with having fear. You also have to be uncomfortable you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I remember, just like Levi, I to the orchestra in middle school, and I remember they were doing a Christmas concert. And my sister and I played cello. We had to take our vocals off of our string and just sit there like this, through the entire Christmas concert, because we weren't allowed to just sit out. And we were just there, and we just had to do that. And so you have to. It's a lot of uncomfortable moments, and you just have to be comfortable with doing, and comfortable with being different and unique and special, in that way. And after a while, it gets easier.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with what all that the panelists said. I know for me growing up, I definitely struggled like in the early days with elementary and stuff, like going to the library and just sitting there while everyone did their thing. I think for me it was because I was a quieter kid that like kept hardships a little bit to themselves. So I think over time, just being again very confident in my why. So like I think first understanding what they're doing. What is Christmas really? What are they really doing when they bow down to that tree? What is the history and the origins? I think that's really eye opening, right? Because you realize you don't want to be a part of that. And then two, I saw a comment from the Rise channel, like being proud in your culture and putting the focus back in that really helps to offset it. Because it's not like we're sitting here saying, oh, we can't do anything. Like we have a very rich and beautiful and truthful and righteous culture in comparison. And so instead of thinking about this time of darkness, getting excited for, a bib, right? Or like Feast of Tabernacles was so fun this year. It was so fun for me. Everyone had a lot of fun, like putting the focus back on that to offset it. And then I think, like Mary Monet said, like just talking to your family or any people that are your age, just to feel like you have someone to relate to, maybe even like reading books. I don't know, that helped me. If other people with different cultures that had like felt like ostracized can really help you build that confidence so that you can be prideful, so that you can feel it. And I always say I'm a proponent of fake it till you make it as well. Someone has anything to say, it may hurt you, but hit them back with the word. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, well, I'm not a devil worshiper. How about that? Like, really hit them where it's at or whatever. So it takes time, but know that you have people here in your corner to support you, and just understand like our culture is rich too. It's even better, even better.
I agree with what you really said, Rachel, especially kind of like learning about the history behind Christmas. To a lot of those young newcomers, don't always just kind of like blow it off, I guess. Like learn about it, dig. If you want to know more about a culture that you're getting into, learn about it. Because one thing that I love about our different holy days and feast days is that there's a purpose behind it. Sabbath, it goes all the way back to Genesis, and it's something that you can really appreciate once you take time to read and see why we do the things that we do. And it also goes the same way, the other way too, when you take the time to learn about things like Christmas or Halloween. You start to see why you don't want to be a part of this and what it's really about and the real secrets behind it. And you see that wickedness, and that acts as an eye opener to an eye changer. So that's what I just really recommend. Take the time to maybe learn before you just ignore it, blow it off, because I promise you, it's gonna open your eyes and how you see the world. So yeah, good job, guys. Good job. Put some fires in the chat, everyone. We got our amazing panel here. Fires in the chat, thumbs up, likes, subscribe. Remember what I said? 100 likes. That's the like goal. Oh, Thomas Glover, thank you for the $50. Let's go. That's another 50 likes, everyone. I'm serious. Hit that like button. So we're gonna move on to our next panel. I think it's the next one. There we go. Do I have anyone who would like to read?
I think it's my turn. Let me see. And Israel, Judges 6, verses 6 to 10. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. And it came to pass, when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet unto the children of Israel, which said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt, and brought you forth out of the house of bondage. And I delivered you out of the land of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of all that oppressed you, and drave them out from before you, and gave you their land. And I said unto you, I am the Lord your God. Fear not the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell, but ye have not obeyed my voice.
So uh, thank you so much, Naomi. But giving a little bit of context here, Israel disobeyed the God of Israel, and they end up being taken over and impoverished by the Midianites. If you read the books of Judges, it's kind of just this endless cycle where we mess up, we get captured, we need someone to save us, and then we mess up, and then you go back and forth and back and forth. But one thing I wanted to point out here is how we were talking about earlier and how we mentioned it. The God of Israel is reminding us of what He can do. He's saying how He's defeated the Egyptians, He's defeated the Amorites, He's the God of gods. And it also ends with, "But ye have not obeyed my voice." So that's two things I want to speak to. How we were saying earlier is you can't take on these challenges, these fears alone all the time. You need the God of Israel, but when you ignore that power, it's going to put you in an impoverished state. So it just really makes me think about focusing on remembering who I am and where I come from, and most importantly, where your strength lies. I told you guys earlier that story where I was struggling after I got out of high school. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Um, it came down to just remembering who I was and where my strength lied. It's not in it's not in man. It's not entirely in myself, but it's in the God of Israel, and through Him I can do anything. So I think that's one of the most amazing things that you have to remember when it comes to facing fears and challenges. Obviously, it's not going to be easy. Even when you do obey the God of Israel, it may not be an easy. The road ain't going to be flat. But at the same time, I promise you, you're going to get there as long as you keep going and you keep pushing. And that's kind of what I really saw here is how Israel, they didn't remember their source of strength. And the Midianites were able to overtake them and put them in an impoverished state because they didn't remember who their God was.
Yeah, and to jump off of this, I think for me, what it also reminds me, the fact that Israel was disobedient, is that the energy and the effort that we put in now can shape this nation's future. And that can be for the better or it can be for the worse. As we saw here, Israel was disobedient, and so they were getting their butts kicked from the Midianites, right? And so I think just applying it to our lives when we're fearful of something, whether it's, going after our career or trying out a new role within the nation, new responsibilities, I think sometimes, inspiration, the spirit can move, right? We always talk about that. Inspiration comes and goes, motivation comes and goes. That's why consistency is so important and understanding the impact of what you're doing. So I think just from the story, what resonates with me is just this idea of whatever you're chasing after, whatever goals you have, understand how it could impact your nation for the better and work towards that and let that fuel you, let that fire push you. We need teachers and educators. A lot of youth right now are working towards that because we want our own school for little Israelite children to see themselves, to be the top scholars, like we talked about Meshach, Shadrach, Abednego, right? We need doctors to heal us, lawyers to come after copyrights when people, try to copy off of Elder Shadrach when he's been in the game for so long, right? Like, we just need so many things for our nation to grow. And so let that fuel your consistency to help shape our nation's course. Like, the, what you're doing at school, like this little essay that's getting on your nerves, may seem so insignificant, but like it could really open up the door for so much more. And so dream so big because it can really help us.
Right. And you're so right, Rachel. Even looking at, your role not only outside the nation, what you can do from outside in, but also what you can do from inside. We're not necessarily sitting here and saying you have to be the next Rise leader, you have to be the next Elder Shadrach, you have to be the next Elder Andal, but put the work in somewhere, recognize your talents and your abilities and use that for the nation in whatever capacity you can, whether that's decorating for feast and putting your hands in a feast, whether that's even saying a testimony during a Sabbath service or even a Saturday afternoon service or a new moon, or even talking to the leadership in your area and asking them where they need help. What can I do to put my hands into this nation for the God of Israel, for my brethren, for myself? You can, help with property management. You can help with anything you feel like you can do. You can make music for the nation. You can do whatever it is that you can do, but just do something to where you can look back and be like, yeah, I did that for the God of Israel. I did that for myself. I did that for this nation. I put my hands into rebuilding this nation and putting the spackle down and putting the bricks on top of each other so that this nation could be even more prosperous than it was all those years and years and years ago.
So true, Miriam. So true.
So true. And I wanted to interject here, kind of even what Rachel was saying about consistency. And I recently just talked to my dad about consistency and the idea of routine and how that can combat a lot of anxiety, and even talking about fear. I mean, if you're consistently having a steady communication and relationship with the God of Israel and your Israelite peers and your family and your brethren, combating fear just becomes that much easier. I mean, you're like, this in front of me is nothing compared to what I have next to me. And so I think consistency and routine and having that committed and constant relationship with your own spirituality is super key to fear.
That's so true. And I also kind of want to jump on what Miriam was saying because the what you were saying about not being the next Elder Shadrach or Elder Andal and just using your own talents, it kind of me put my nerd glasses on because I'm out to nerd out a little bit here. But it kind of reminds me about one of the animes I like to watch, One Piece. And one of the main themes is that not everyone in the main cast is able to fight and take on these giant monsters, but they each kind of have their own roles. And if you take out just one of them, there are so many points in the series where everyone would have died because each of them has their own key roles in the story and on the crew. And so I kind of relate that back to Israel by what you just said is don't be the next Elder Andor or be the next Elder Shadrach, be the next you. Do what Miriam can do. Use Miriam talents to help influence the nation. Use Naomi's talents to help influence the nation. Rachel's talents. All of those talents you need to use to help influence and grow the nation. You should be known for what you did, not trying to be like someone else. Because even though Joshua took over Moses' role, there are things when you read Joshua's story that Joshua did different from Moses. Joshua wasn't exactly like Moses. He had his own way of running things. And that's with all these different leaders. They have their own way of running things, but at the same time, it's what they become known for. They're able to stand out for that. And I think that as a Rise member, especially, and just a youth, you got to look at it in that way. We're not saying that you got to take up this staff, lead us through the Red Sea, We're not saying that, but do what you can do. Do your very best. Do what you physically can do. Do your all. And that's all he's asking, is just to do your all. So we're gonna move on to the next panel unless we have some more comments. But I kind of want to look at the YouTube comments while we're waiting here. Uh, you, I think Clyde 2019 said, "You never know where your talents will lead you." That's so true. You never know where they lead you. Exactly. Talents are extremely important. That's another lesson in itself. Felicia Singleton said, "Say it again for the people in the back, Naomi." Rise is on fire from D. Lee Hines. Good job. Rise up, rise up. Pansy put, "My goodness, you guys are knowledgeable beyond your years, loving the wisdom and energy." Thank you so much. All this knowledge comes from our elders, and especially our elder Shadrach and our God. Thank you guys so much for commenting, putting likes in the chat. I see all the donations. Let's keep it coming. Subscribe and likes. Let's go. 100. That's the like goal. So yeah, we're gonna move on to the next panel. I think we can go on to the next. Unless fears of growing up, the threat of feeling one's aloneness, knowing ourselves as independent, authentic adults makes us actually aware of our painful existential issues. So what I got from reading this is how sometimes how we were talking about those large and daunting tasks, they kind of make you feel alone. Especially how relating it to going to school, how no one else is gonna know that you're an Israelite. Especially for me, like a lot of my time, I was in school by myself, or I was like the only Israelite in my entire class, my entire school. So you stand out, and in that standing out, you feel alone. We kind of talked about this earlier. Um, and I do feel like that's a powerful fear to overcome. But just like we said earlier, is once again remembering not to forget, you're not truly alone. You're never truly alone. There's someone with you. But that's kind of what I took from this panel, and this fact. It was just truly something that felt really powerful. It's a true realistic fear that people have today, is that fear of being alone, that no one else understands your pain. Even just outside of just being an Israelite, just being a teen in general, you kind of don't feel like your parents may not always understand the point of view you're coming from, and that may be because you're not communicating in the best way for them to be able to understand. But I feel like that's what Rise is here to do. As your fellow youth and Rise members, we are able to talk and lean on one each other in a more understanding way. Rachel, I remember especially like through middle school and just growing up into those teenager years, I was able to talk and relate with my sister a lot more than I was when I was younger. And we were able to sit down and have those deep conversations, whether they be serious conversations or not. And it helps build that bond. And I feel like as Rise members and out to all the youth in the nation, remember you have that bond, not just with your family, but with your cousins who are also in this nation, who go through those same things and have that same Israel mentality in their life. And it's important, if you really want to overcome those fears and to not stay in a complacent place, to lean on them.
Definitely. I think when you have the fear of being alone and growing up, that is a fear common in Israel, because we are, one of like 100 people. But also, so I just got out of college, and I have a lot of people that are just getting out of college, trying to figure out what they're doing in life and realizing that they feel a little bit more alone than they did maybe last year or the year before, because you're not constantly interacting with other people. Maybe you moved away from home, stuff like that. And so I think even combating aloneness and the fear of being alone is really, really important, in being with your peers and being a part of Rise and connecting more with your Israelite family. But I think also there is an importance in being alone. I have learned so much about myself and about my own spirituality from being alone. Like, I'm a totally different person than I was last year and the year before, from taking those moments to myself and analyzing my own fears, my own trials, and getting my spirituality up. And it's not perfect, but it's more than it was last year. I think that's really important too. I think being independent and growing up, getting out in that world, being by yourself is important, and you kind of strengthen your mental and your spirituality by doing that.
So true. And I like how you kind of put the spin on it of I may be alone, but it's how you reacted to that almost feeling of being alone. Instead of using it as a negative, you used it as a positive to help further your spirituality and growth. Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I so 1,000% agree with Naomi. I think a lot of times fear or the journey that we have to take is so fearful because part of us knows that it will also expose our weaknesses as well. And dealing with your weaknesses is never easy, and figuring out how to move past them is really hard. So I think that's just something to consider as well. And again, just the power of self reflection in those moments and analyzing your fears and seeing how you can turn them into strengths is so important during those times. But I so agree. During that transition, it can definitely feel lonely. But what I say, and some people may push against this, but I like to say selfishness is not always a bad thing, right? Like when you are alone, it's an opportunity for you to put yourself first and the idea of like, okay, I'm weak here spiritually. Let me focus on this. Because when you're a young adult, this is the one time where maybe you not may not have responsibilities in terms of raising a family or being in a marriage or having to do, etc., take care of a family, whatever. It's your one time where you can really focus on yourself and build a stronger you, a stronger adult you. And so taking that time is what I like to call your selfish error, right? To like focus on your spiritual weaknesses, right? Physical, like just getting stronger and being more whole, I think is so important. And to take advantage of that time is so important.
That's so true. And then Miriam?
I think something that's really important to note here is, like Naomi said, when you're alone, you kind of lean on the God of Israel more and lean into your spirituality more. So you can't always see being alone as a negative. I think in the moment when you finally realize, like, wow, I'm really alone in this, like, you're not at the same time because you have the God of Israel to lean on. And you can build up that, not only that relationship with him, but even that relationship with the scriptures and that relationship that you have with your forefathers, and really be like, wow, I'm really not alone, because look at how my forefathers, they were alone and they did the exact thing that I'm doing right now, turning to the God of Israel, praying more, expanding my own spirituality. So I think that taking those moments where you're like, wow, like I don't feel like I have anyone, and just really looking at that and saying, okay, what does that mean though? What does me being alone right now mean? What does that look like for me? How can I change this feeling of aloneness and loneliness into a positive? How can I change this into something that I can look back on and be like, wow, I'm really happy I did that. Or wow, I'm really happy I leaned on the God of Israel in that moment. Or wow, I'm really happy I went to I don't have one, but my older sibling, and said, I'm feeling pretty alone right now and I need, that sort of that support. So I think that, taking over that feeling of aloneness and turning it into something more positive is definitely an amazing thing that you can do with that.
So true. I love hearing how all of you guys have learned to deal with that aloneness. It's truly inspiring. And then we have a comment from Isaac underscore 9256. The loneliness can make a very strong Israelite if he puts his confidence in the God of Israel. That's true. That's true. You even kind of see that relating to the scriptures, how you have uh, all of Israel's doing wrong, and you just have one prophet who's on that straight and narrow path doing what he can. Isaiah and Jeremiah, those were strong Israelites because they were put at the bottom of the well, worst positions, and they still never were able to curse God or turn back on their job. That's true strength.
And just to jump in, I also think about just how Israel has always been separate, right? Separation is so important for us. Even when we came out of Egypt, we had to be alone to wean off of the Egyptians where it had been so long. Or even looking at the story of some of our forefathers, like Abraham, right? Where he had a journey alone and like kind of wean off of all that you knew, your parents, right, to really test how strong you is I think like the story of an Israelite's life. So I really resonate with that comment.
So true. Well, we don't have much time left but I do I do have some more panels that I want to get into. Yeah, this is exactly what I want to start getting into. I think I'm gonna read this one because there's kind of another question I want to ask. So verse 22. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came in and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done with the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of God, of the living God? So, story of David. I don't think I gotta repeat what happens. Everyone has heard this 1,000 times. And if you're in Israel and if you haven't, I'm not gonna judge you, but I might look at you a little different if you haven't heard this story. So, what I wanted to bring up with this story is David. Can we say that David had courage? Because when I read the story of David, we always kind of relate him as a character with courage, but to me, to have courage, you have to have fear. But what I think David had, and what kind of made him more special, especially from the God of Israel, is that he never had that residual fear. When you go back to stories like Moses or what we were just reading, Joshua, or even with Gideon, all of these Israelites, they had a sense of fear, a small sense of fear. They were still able to do amazing things as you go on to read, but the Bible always kind of makes a point out that they had that anxiety and fear. That's only human, that's natural. But what spoke out with David to me is he never had that fear. To me, if he had that fear, I feel like you would see the God of Israel talking to him, helping to reassure him. But this entire story, it's David's own actions. So that's why I have a question. Do you guys think this is still courage?
I think that David did have fear, but it's not necessarily fear of other people. I think he had serious fear of the God of Israel, because he was able to use that fear and know the might of the God of Israel, especially in that scenario with Goliath. He looked at everyone and he said, guys, we have the greatest God of all time. What are you doing? How are you afraid? That makes no sense. Because of his fear and confidence in the God of Israel, knowing that the God of Israel is powerful enough to smite all of them down with just the snap of his finger. I think David had not necessarily a fear that we have where it's like, I'm afraid to do something, or I'm afraid to put myself out there in a certain way. He didn't have the fear of his brothers and the other Israelite men in that scenario. He had a serious fear of the God of Israel, which turned into, we can do anything because we have the God of Israel on our side. And I don't want to see what happens when we don't have that fear of the God of Israel. And I don't want to see what happens when we decide that they can beat us and that we can't, and we forget the might and the strength and the power of our God. I think that that's the kind of fear that David had.
I wasn't even gonna say that, Mary. I'm just thinking in new ways. Thank you. I was wondering, I wonder how they're gonna answer this question. That was a beautiful answer. Thinking in very new ways, opening up my mind to different perspectives. So, Mary, Naomi, Rachel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, fear comes from many different places. I mean, David saw these Philistine people and said, these uncircumcised Philistines. I mean, who are they compared to us? And even I think we're going to read on, but also just to look ahead a little bit. When David talks about facing different animals when he was younger, I think going through separate trials where fear comes into play. I think courage is like a muscle and faith is like a muscle. You have to like constantly flex it and work it, so that you come to this instance where you're with these in war in this battle, and you're with this people, and you have very little fear for this, but just fear for your God. And so you're able to kind of see through that and have the courage like David did. But I think even going through his as a child, and he's very young here, but even younger as a child, and seeing that probably instances of fear, and building up his courage, that led him to do so. So it's like a muscle. You kind of constantly have to work it and use it and like learn how it moves and works within your own self.
So true. That's another great perspective. Just knowing what your own beautiful. Rachel?
No, I don't really have a lot to say because I think what's been said is good. It's just, I think UK Rise did a Friday night a few weeks ago, and it was just like, where's your trust in, right? And so, as it was just said, I think David had trust. You know, he knew who his God was. He had had those experiences already built up, and so that was sort of like the accumulation, you can say, of that moment where he was able to display such courage.
So true. Thank you guys so much. We're almost out of time, but I gotta say, this is an amazing panel, dream team panel right here. Thank you guys so much. So I don't know if we have enough time for this, but we did have, I think, one more scripture. It was the one Naomi was mentioning. We can pull it up real quick. I believe this should be the next panel. Oh, back one. And I'm going to try to speed read this so we can do our closing words. I had a video, but I don't think we're going to have enough time to get into it. So, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. That's a closer. That's a closer right there. So, like I said, we don't got a lot of time, so kind of we're going to tie this kind of a bit into our closing remarks. Anyone want to go first?
Sure. I think just tying this into that video that we weren't able to play, which was really good. It's titled "Courage is Contagious." And so from this, I think, you know, fear is contagious. You see it all in this example that we're reading now, right? The men at war were scared of Goliath, and so was Saul. And you have this young Israelite man, David, coming in and saying, no, we can do this. I can do this. And sort of showing them, like, when you push past that fear of man and only fear the God of Israel, as Miriam said, so much can happen for our nation. We can prevail, we can win. And so I think this is a great example of, you know, taking the mindset of fear may be contagious, but let's think about courage being contagious. Let's think about doing things for our God that can be the catalyst to inspire others in our nation to be courageous and fight for our God and be only fearful for our God.
So true. So true.
I think that's so true, Rachel. You did great. Put a bow right on it. But yeah, I think it's so important, like was said before, to acknowledge our fear and turn it into something positive, like David did. He took the fear of the God of Israel and turned it into defeating Goliath with pebbles. So like you can look at the examples and the people that we can look up to in the Bible, in our history, and see that some of our strongest leaders, yes, they were fearful, but they used that fear and they turned it into courage. And then they turned that courage into, even how many times did someone save Israel from someone else? So, you know, you take that fear, you turn it into courage, and you use it in a positive way for yourself, for the nation, for your family, and for our God.
Yes, I think courage is a big word, and we sometimes only attribute this, which of course it should be given unto this David and stories like this in the Bible and our forefathers, like in these big events. But courage can also be seen in everyday life. I mean, courage to go to college, courage to pick a career, courage to go to the grocery store. I mean, those are all like battling anxieties and common fears that we have. And I think that's, again, work that muscle. Keep encountering uncomfortable situations and fear to build your courage. And in your courage also is your spirituality. Spirituality also is a muscle that you have to work and have that repetitive nature in your communication and your relationship with the God of Israel and your Israelite peers and your own spirituality to build your courageous spirit. And also, I think fear is a natural response, but your natural response to fear should be this culture, and it should be the God of Israel. It should be prayer. It should be the people around you to help combat that. And we see that throughout the Bible, especially even in David's sense, and through that, courage can be built.
So true. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate being on this panel with you guys. You guys have so much wisdom and insight to share. For me, I guess just taking away from this is I also want to mention how what Miriam was saying about how David had fear in the God of Israel, and how what Naomi was saying about those muscles and how he's been in those difficult situations before. And I feel like that final verse that we read, it was a combination of both what you guys just said. David, he's fought lions, he's taken on bears. All his life, he was prepared for this. But what's even beautiful is even in that preparation, he knew that the reason he was able to be a young boy and take on the lion was because of the God of Israel, because of how the God of Israel made him, the talents that the God of Israel gifted to him. He understood where his power was from. And that's kind of what led to him being able to accomplish those goals. And for me, that is a big motivator. I know we hear the story of David a lot, but just being a nerd I am and watching different animes and wanting to write my own stories myself, the story of David has just truly inspired me and made me really think when it comes to the topic of fear and how to overcome it. And I think the main way to overcome it is to remember to not forget. Like I said earlier, you got to remember who you're from, your legacy, the people you have, the resources that you have available. All of those things you have to keep in your mind so that when you face those challenges, you are prepared to overcome them. So that's it for today. I do want to say we were supposed to have one more member on. Jeremiah from the ATO branch is supposed to be here with us. So I got to give a shout out to him for helping me prepare this. So I know he had a lot to say. So fires in the chat for Jeremiah. He was supposed to be here with us too. But unfortunately, the connection wasn't allowing him. But thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, when I get off here, I want to see 100 likes. I'm not playing with you guys. I want to see 100 likes. Thank you so much for the donations. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you're here for Saturday night. Saturday, when we have more of this Israelite beautiful speaking and words. Oh, I have so much in my head going on. Just thank you so much for tuning in. Fires in the chat. That is our lesson for tonight. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Peace.
He said, go down there into Egypt land and let my people go and make them understand. Yeah, the words of the Lord speak of wisdom, yes, might is great. Moses listened.